Hello, my dear patrons. DF here. Welcome to another episode of Writing Beauties, a series of writing advice for you aspiring writers out there. If you'll remember, last time we talked about creating original characters, and this episode is an extension of what was discussed. Because so much has happened in the last century regarding human rights, one thing that you want to avoid when creating characters in any medium, whether it's books or television or movies, is adhering to stereotypes. Whether it's in terms of gender, race, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, or nationality, stereotypes can be harmful, especially today. I felt it was appropriate to talk about this due to the Black Lives Matter movement and it being LGBTQ Pride Month. If you've ever watched old movies or read old books, you'll find that the characters are predominantly white males. If a female ever shows up, she's usually the love interest, or the damsel in distress, or the femme fatale, or the mother, and doesn't really contribute much to the plot. Sometimes you will have only one female character, period. And when a person of color appears, it's usually the servant or the savage or the comedy relief, in the case of movies, often played by a white actor. Even just foreigners are treated like clowns with broken English and ridiculous traits like the British saying, "Hip hip cheerio," and being obsessed with tea. But there's no need for us to do that anymore. When you write a story, you want to do something that has never been done before, even if it's something very small. Take the film Night of the Living Dead, for example. Horror films used to just feature white people, with the people of color either being the first to die or the villains. In the case of the Mummy movie, they're played by white people. This movie changed cinematic history by putting a black man in the heroic role. And in the 1960s, that was a pretty big deal, paving the way for movies like Get Out and Us, horror movies featuring black people in the leading roles. You also want to try avoiding tokenism, like putting one black person or one female in the cast just so you can call the cast diverse. Even just a black best friend serving as a comic relief can be harmful. Or a female whose main purpose is to be a male character's love interest. Maybe when adapting a famous story like Robin Hood, think of how it would work in modern-day New York, and Robin Hood was a black man fighting against the oppression of the poorer communities. Just an example of how you can change things up in telling a story that's been told many times, and relating it to a modern audience. But don't just be inclusive for the sake of being inclusive. Think about what is important to you. Is there a culture that you've always wanted to learn more about? Do you have friends of a different ethnicity who you want represented more in the media? You don't have to be Native American to write about Native Americans, for example. But do your research, and keep in mind that Native Americans have different tribes, so don't mix Mohawk traditions with Navajo, for example. You'd be surprised what story ideas you can find when doing research on other cultures, from their folktales to their religions. If you can, interview people of the culture you're studying. Ask whatever questions you can to make sure that your portrayal is respectful. One thing to keep in mind, not all people of one culture, ethnicity, religion, etc. will have the same experiences. A black person living in Manhattan will have a totally different experience than a black person in Nigeria. I myself often like to write biracial characters, or characters who come from more than one cultural background, because growing up overseas and being an American descended from Polish immigrants makes multiculturalism very important to me. For instance, African Americans do have African heritage, but remember that they are also American, and that will contribute to their culture as well. The way to avoid stereotypes is to keep in mind that while a person's cultural background is important, it's not their one defining trait. You're still developing characters with their own unique personalities. Take Moana from Disney's film on Polynesian culture. Her ancestry makes up her yearning to help her people and travel the sea, but she's also determined, adventurous, and spunky, and goes through her own character journey. Or maybe like in Pixar's Coco, the point of the story is for the character to gain a better understanding of their culture. Sometimes a character might not be aware of their ancestry at all, and all they know is the culture of the country they grew up in. In this respect, you'll want to treat your character of color like you would any other character in shaping their personality. Now, in terms of gender stereotypes, bear in mind that the majority of protagonists are male in all forms of media, even today. So, political correctness aside, publishers and studios are looking for strong female heroines. Also keep in mind that 51% of the population is female, so having strong female characters is very marketable. Nothing is wrong with romance or having your girl like pink. Pink's a good color. But again, don't make that her one defining trait. Take Kim Possible, for example. She is a very pretty cheerleader, yet her skills as a cheerleader make her athletic, and she's also smart and saves the world outside of school. You can even make fun of stereotypes, like have a girl pretend to be a dunce to hide the fact that she's really smart, but doesn't think that will impress the guys, so she doesn't really show it as much. Or like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. She's assumed to be dumb by her peers because she is blonde and likes fashion, but she's really smart, and though almost adheres to stereotypes to get the guy, in the end she learns that she doesn't just need a guy in order to have a successful life. She can be successful on her own. And if you are going to have a male protagonist, that's okay too. But you also want to avoid male stereotypes, such as the dumb jock, or not being into housework or cooking. If you are going to have a male character be strong, you can avoid the stereotype by making them sensitive, but perhaps afraid to show it because they are afraid they might be made fun of for being sensitive because it's not manly. Masculinity can be stereotyped too, so explore the side of males we don't normally see in media. By avoiding these stereotypes and showing the side that's not normally shown in gender, you can let young girls know that they can be strong, they can be smart, they don't have to just be pretty. And for guys, they don't have to be strong all the time. They can have emotions, they can be sensitive, they can even like pink. You also want to avoid gay stereotypes. A guy being sensitive or flamboyant doesn't make him gay. A girl being a tomboy doesn't make her a lesbian. Being gay doesn't classify the things you like, except when it comes to romance. I mean, I like guys and girls, and am a girl myself, but I'm into some girly stuff, like Barbies and ponies, but I also like video games and sometimes horror. Our gender and sexuality isn't defined by our hobbies. And historically, things that were usually considered girly, like ballet or horses, were originally professions and hobbies that were strictly for men. Also take into consideration that men used to wear tights, so really what's classified as girly or manly really depends on society, not biology. And as the centuries go by, it's forever changing. So again, keep in mind that not all boys or girls are the same. Gender, culture, religion, race, and sexuality can make up a character. But remember, these are only parts of a character. What you come up with in terms of their personality, their interests, their experiences, their dreams, their hopes, their fears, that is what makes up a character. All these things that will drive their actions. Don't think of what a woman or a black person would do in a situation. Think about what your character would do. So, to recap, in order to avoid stereotypes, do research, think of what is rarely done, and remember that biology does not define your character. So I hope when you're creating your characters, you keep all of this in mind, and good luck with your writing. Because remember, what we read in books and see in the movies will shape the future of this world. The pen is mightier than the sword, and we writers have the power to change the world. Alright, until next time, thank you for your continuing support.